They thought they were invisible. They thought they were unstoppable. They were wrong. On the morning of February 5th, 2026, something extraordinary happened on the front lines of southern Ukraine. In the Zaporizhia region, one of the most violently contested strips of land on the entire planet, Russian assault squads woke up and reached for their Starlink terminals, the devices that had become as essential to them as weapons, as vital as oxygen. And they got nothing. Not a flicker, not a loading screen, just darkness. 100% blackout, gone. Within hours, Ukrainian forces who had waited, watched, and planned for exactly this moment, erupted from their defensive lines and began taking back ground at a speed that left the entire military world speechless. This is the story of how a single decision made in a server room thousands of miles away shifted the momentum of the deadliest land war in Europe since World War II. To understand why this Starlink blackout hit Russia like a sledgehammer, you need to understand what Starlink had become for Russian forces. Not just a convenience, not just a luxury, a tactical lifeline. Starlink is Elon Musk's SpaceX satellite internet service. It runs on a constellation of over 6,000 satellites orbiting in low Earth orbit, roughly 550 kilometers above our heads, unlike traditional satellite internet, which relies on a handful of massive geostationary satellites positioned 35,000 kilometers. Up too slow for real-time battlefield use, Starlink. Low-orbit network delivers blazing fast speeds and near-zero latency. In military terms, that means drone pilots can see their targets in real time. Commanders can share encrypted battlefield maps instantly. Artillery units can receive targeting data in under a second. Frontline infantry can maintain communication even when every tower, every cable, and every radio repeater in the area has been bombed into rubble. Ukraine understood Starlink's value immediately. They put it to brilliant use from the very first months of the war. It became the backbone of their entire military command structure. Ukrainian drones wouldn't even fly without it. Ukrainian artillery wouldn't fire with precision without it. But here's where it gets complicated. Starlink is only licensed for use in certain countries. Russia is not one of them. The sale or transfer of Starlink terminals to Russia violates U.S. sanctions. Yet somehow, as the war dragged on, Russian units started appearing with the same dish-shaped Starlink antennas on their vehicles, in their trenches and mounted on the noses of their shade-attack drones. How? Russia had built a massive, sophisticated smuggling network. A Russian military intelligence, the GRU funneled Starlink terminals through third-party countries, the UAE, the ex-Soviet republics, Turkey, and others. They were purchased using falsified documents, activated on accounts registered in countries where Starlink is legal, shipped to the front in unmarked boxes. By late 2025, Russian military bloggers estimated that thousands of smuggled terminals were operational across the entire eastern and southern front line. For Moscow, this was a strategic triumph. They had taken a weapon built specifically to help Ukraine and turned it against Ukraine. Russian drone operators could now outmaneuver Ukrainian jamming systems. Russian commanders could coordinate real-time assault operations with the same speed and clarity as their adversaries. What Russian military planners failed to account for was this: it was still Elon Musk's satellite network, and Elon Musk was about to answer a very different phone call. By January 2026, Ukrainian military intelligence had a serious problem on their hands. Intercepted communications from Russian units in the Zaporizhia region were showing something alarming. Russian assault teams were using Starlink not just for communications. They were using it to receive real-time drone reconnaissance feeds of Ukrainian defensive positions. They were using it to pilot attack drones deep into Ukrainian rear areas, bypassing Ukrainian electronic warfare systems entirely. They were using it to coordinate multi-pronged infantry assaults with the kind of precision that was costing Ukrainian lives every single day. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry, led by the newly appointed minister Mikhailo Fedorov, who had made his name as Ukraine's digitization minister, launched a classified operation. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Ukraine would compile a verified master list of every legitimate Ukrainian military and civilian Starlink terminal operating inside the country. Every unit would register. Every terminal would be verified. And once that list, the whitelist, was complete, Ukraine would hand it to SpaceX with a single request: keep these on. Kill everything else. February 2, 2026. The Ukrainian government formally approved the resolution. Fedorov announced it publicly on Telegram. Soon, only verified and registered terminals will operate in Ukraine. Everything else will be disconnected. The clock had started, and Russia had no idea. February 2, 2026. The whitelist begins. Ukrainian Defense Minister Fedorov launches the mass registration drive for Starlink terminals. Ukrainian soldiers and commanders across every front, Donetsk, Kharkov, Zaporizhia, Kherson, are ordered to verify and register their terminals immediately. The operation runs around the clock. Fedorov's team works in coordination with SpaceX engineers on the technical side of the verification architecture. February 3rd to 4th, 2026. The race, thousands of Ukrainian terminal registrations pour in. Some Ukrainian soldiers, those who had privately acquired terminals, outside official channels, scramble to get their devices verified before the cutoff. SpaceX engineers categorize every Starlink terminal operating within Ukrainian geographic coordinates into two categories: whitelisted verified Ukrainian and unlisted everything else. Russian units, blissfully unaware, continue to rely on their smuggled terminals as normal. February 5, 2026, 6 o'clock UTC, the switch SpaceX executes the operation. In what one insider described as hexagon-shaped cells going dark on an internal map one by one, the non-whitelisted Starlink terminals across the Ukrainian front line are deactivated. The kill command is clean, surgical, and immediate. Elon Musk tweets a single instruction to Ukrainian Starlink users: important to register your Starlink terminal, if in Ukraine. The tone is casual. The consequences are catastrophic for Russia. February 5, 2026, 8 o'clock UTC, panic on the front line. Russian frontline units begin reporting connectivity failures to their commanders. Within 2 hours, the reports have become a flood. At least 9 of Russia's most prominent pro-war military bloggers, men with direct access to frontline units, begin posting alarmed messages on Telegram. This is all very bad, writes blogger Roman Alekin, especially given how crucial communications are at the front. Another popular Russian military Telegram channel writes, "This will hit harder than anywhere at our frontline assault groups. For example, in Kupiansk, February 5, 2026 to 10 o'clock. UTC catastrophic command collapse. Sergei Flash Beskristnov, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry's electronic warfare advisor, publishes a battlefield assessment that would be quoted around the world. His words are blunt and striking. For the enemy at the front, this is not just a problem. It is a catastrophe. All command and control of the troops has collapsed. Assault operations have been halted in many areas." 3 separate Ukrainian commanders, speaking anonymously to the Kyiv Independent, confirmed that their units have intercepted frantic radio messages from Russian troops describing the scale of the failure. February 5th to 8th, 2026, Russia searches for a backup. The Russian military's predicament is now fully exposed. Moscow does not possess a working domestic alternative to Starlink's Lorbit satellite communication capability. Russia's own satellite internet ambitions, a planned constellation of 300 satellites to be called Sfera, had been catastrophically delayed. As of early 2026, the first 16 satellites had been pushed back to a launch date later in the year. In the meantime, Russian units fall back on older, slower, more vulnerable radio communication systems. Ukrainian electronic warfare units, knowing exactly what frequencies Russian forces would now be forced to use, begin intense jamming and interception operations immediately. February 9, 2026, the second blow. Moscow, desperate to control the information environment, makes a stunning decision. It blocks access to Telegram along the frontline. Telegram, encrypted messaging app that Russian military units had used as an unofficial but essential secondary command layer. The move backfires immediately. Rather than securing communications, it removes yet another fallback option. Russian military bloggers themselves, cut off from their audiences, are furious. One Kremlin-aligned blogger writes cryptically about new complicating factors affecting operations. The closest public acknowledgement yet of the cascading crisis. February 9, 2026, Ukraine moves. Ukrainian military commanders, who had prepared extensively for this window, begin their ground operation. In the eastern Zaporizhia region, a sector that had barely moved in months, Ukrainian infantry and armored units push into Russian-held positions with striking speed. The combination of degraded Russian communications, collapsed drone coordination, and disrupted command structures creates gaps that Ukrainian forces exploit with precision. ISW begins tracking Ukrainian counterattack activity near the Dnipropetrovsk-Zaporizhzhia regional border. February 11, 2026, NATO confirms the link. A senior NATO official, speaking ahead of a meeting of NATO defense ministers in Brussels, makes a remarkable public statement. Taking that link away has put the Russians in somewhat of a command-and-control predicament. The official, speaking on condition of anonymity, directly confirms that Ukrainian battlefield gains in eastern Zaporizhzhia may be linked to the Starlink shutdown. The Russian military has no formal comment. Their silence speaks volumes. February 11th to 16th. What 26210 square kilometers in 5 days, the numbers that will define this week, according to analysis by France's agents, France Press. Drawing on data from the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainian forces recapture approximately 210 square kilometers in the Zaporizhzhia region between February 11th and 16th, 2026. To put that in context, it is the largest Ukrainian territorial gain in a single 5-day window since their major counteroffensive of June 2023. It is roughly equivalent to the entire territory Russia had gained across the whole month of December 2025, which stood at 244 square kilometers. The Russian military average for monthly gains throughout 2025 had been 171 square miles. Ukraine erased months of Russian progress in under a week. Let's talk tactics. Because this wasn't just a lucky break for Ukraine. This was a planned military operation executed with extraordinary precision. Step 1. Reconnaissance dominance. With Russian drone coordination crippled by the Starlink blackout, Ukrainian forces immediately seized what military planners call ISR dominance, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Ukrainian drones, still connected through verified whitelisted Starlink terminals, could now operate over Russian positions with dramatically reduced risk of Russian counter-drone response. Every Russian troop movement, every supply line, every fortified position was being watched. Step 2. Electronic warfare exploitation. Ukrainian electronic warfare units deployed along the front lines understood precisely what frequencies Russian forces would fall back on when Starlink went dark. Standard VHF and UHF radio. Older battlefield communications systems. Ukrainian EW teams began jamming these frequencies and intercepting Russian communications simultaneously. Russian unit commanders found themselves either unable to reach their superiors or giving orders over channels they knew but could unprove were being monitored by the enemy. Step 3. Speed over consolidation. Ukrainian commanders made a deliberate choice. Move fast and move wide before Russian forces could improvise new command structures. Rather than advancing slowly on a narrow axis, Ukrainian units probed multiple points along the front simultaneously, exploiting confusion, forcing Russian commanders to make decisions with incomplete information and degraded communications. This is a classic deep battle theory application. Strike across. Multiple vectors to prevent the enemy from concentrating their response. Step 4. Information war. Ukrainian military communication during this period was disciplined and strategic. Official Ukrainian sources described the operation carefully, not as a major counteroffensive, but as limited counterattacks targeting separated frontline units. This served two purposes. It managed international expectations, and it prevented Russia from accurately assessing the true scale of what was happening until it was too late to respond effectively. Some Russian military bloggers themselves noted the confusion. Poor frontline communications are clouding the operational picture. Step back from the front lines for a moment. Step back from the burning villages and the satellite maps and the body counts. And look at what just happened from 10,000 feet up. A private American company, technically a civilian service, just made a unilateral decision that directly altered the outcome of one of the most consequential land wars in living memory. Not a government, not a military alliance, not NATO or the Pentagon. Single company, run by one man, flipping a switch on a server thousands of miles away. This is not a small thing. This is a landmark moment in the history of warfare. Here's the brutal truth about what Russia's Starlink dependency revealed. Moscow spent billions of dollars, sacrificed hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and staked its geopolitical future on an illegal technology dependency, on a foreign satellite network they had no ability to control, no ability to protect, and no ability to replace. Russian losses as of February 15, 2026, according to Ukraine's general staff, now stand at 1,253,270 military personnel killed, wounded, or missing since the full-scale invasion began on February 24, 2022. Over 1,200,000 human beings removed from the battlefield, and despite this staggering cost, Russia had only managed to control approximately 19.5% of Ukrainian territory. For all of that blood, they couldn't even secure their own communications network. Meanwhile, Ukraine, outmanned, outgunned, fighting against a nuclear-armed state with a military budget 10 times larger, had just executed a technologically sophisticated operation that recaptured in 5 days what Russia had taken months to gain. Don't make the mistake of thinking Russia is finished. They are not. They are bleeding. They are humiliated, but they are not done. Russian military engineers are already working on contingency communication systems. The Russian Ministry of Defense has been quietly accelerating procurement of Chinese-made communication equipment, including satellite modems compatible with Chinese low-orbit satellites. Russia is also investing heavily in its own Starlink alternative, the Sfera constellation. Though delays have pushed the initial launch window into mid to late 2026 at the earliest. In the interim, Russian commanders are reportedly experimenting with a hybrid mesh network approach, using a combination of military radio, 4G cellular signals boosted by mobile towers moved close to the front, and encrypted messaging over existing civilian satellite infrastructure in allied states. None of these are as fast as Starlink. None of them offer the same latency. And none of them solve the fundamental problem. Russia is now fighting a technologically superior adversary with technologically inferior communications. And their adversary has demonstrated dramatically that it knows exactly how to exploit that gap. Russia's response to the Zaporizhzhia collapse has been to intensify airstrikes. In the weeks surrounding these events, Russian forces unleashed wave after wave of missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Prime Minister Shmyhal reported that Russia had struck Ukrainian energy infrastructure 217 times in 2026 alone. The goal is grimly familiar: destroy Ukrainian power, heat, and civilian morale. Try to force Kyiv to the negotiating table by making the war unlivable for ordinary Ukrainians. But here's what Russia can't bomb: the technical knowledge, the battle-hardened commanders, and the strategic agility that Ukraine just demonstrated in Zaporizhzhia. There is a story within the story here, and it runs much deeper than the front lines of Zaporizhzhia. Elon Musk and Starlink's role in this war has been one of the most controversial chapters of the entire conflict. In 2022, Musk made headlines when he reportedly ordered Starlink service cut off in Crimea as Ukrainian drones approached. The Russian Black Sea Fleet, an episode that shocked senior SpaceX employees and, according to subsequent reporting, effectively reshaped the front line of the conflict. Musk later denied this. The reporting was sourced to 3 people with direct knowledge of the incident. Then in early 2026, the same Elon Musk, responding to a Ukrainian government request, threw the switch the other way. He helped Ukraine cripple Russian communications. His tweet was casual: "Looks like the steps we took to stop the unauthorized use of Starlink by Russia have worked. Let us know if more needs to be done. Let us know if more needs to be done." Read that sentence carefully. The most consequential satellite communication network on the planet's most active battlefield. And the man who controls it is essentially saying, "Ask me again if you need another favor." This is what military strategists and governments around the world are wrestling with right now. It's not just how do we build better communications networks for our armies, but what does it mean when the most decisive military technologies on a modern battlefield are owned by private individuals rather than nation-states? And what happens when those private individuals change their minds? Ukraine is very aware of this fragility. That's why the whitelist operation was unjust about cutting off Russia. It was about formalizing Ukrainian control over their own Starlink access, making it institutional. making it less dependent on a single person's mood or political alignment. Let's bring this home. Russia spent years building an illegal, smuggled dependency on a technology they didn't own, couldn't control, and had no backup for. They integrated it so deeply into their command structure that when it disappeared, their entire assault architecture collapsed. Drone coordination gone. Real-time artillery targeting gone. Synchronized infantry operations gone. Ukraine, meanwhile, spent weeks executing a meticulous technical operation designed to surgically eliminate exactly that dependency at exactly the right moment. To surgically eliminate exactly that dependency at exactly the right moment. And when they hit the button, they had troops ready. They had commanders briefed. They had a plan. The result? 210 square kilometers recaptured in 5 days. The largest single-week Ukrainian territorial gain in almost 3 years of full-scale war. In an area Russia had spent months and thousands of soldiers trying to advance through. Ukraine moved like they were walking through an open door. Now, right now, as you're watching this, Russia is scrambling. They are patching their communications network. They are launching drone attacks to try to change the narrative. Russian military bloggers who praised their army's advance for months are publicly admitting this is our Achilles heel. And Ukraine is watching. Ukraine is preparing. Somewhere in the Ukrainian general staff, there are commanders asking a very interesting question. Where do we go next? The big question? Russia knows its communications are compromised. They know Ukraine can exploit this window. But they also have 1,000 kilometers of front line to defend and no quick fix on the horizon. So here's what we need you to think about and tell us in the comments. Can Russia adapt fast enough to stop Ukraine from turning this communications collapse into a full-scale strategic reversal? Or has the Starlink blackout permanently shifted the technological balance of this war? And what does it mean for the future? When the most powerful weapons on the modern battlefield are a satellite dish and a password? Drop your answer in the comments below. Smash the like button if this opened your eyes to something you had unseen in the mainstream news. Subscribe because on this channel, we go deeper, we go faster, and we go places most channels won't touch.